I know it's seen as a flop, but I remember loving and watching Robert Altman's Popeye the Sailor Man as a kid every time it appeared on cable. I don't know about the rest of you, but Robin Williams' performance was spot on, and those tunes were pretty damn catchy.
What am I? I'm Popeye, the sailor, and I am what I am, what I am, and I am what I am, and that's all that I am, 'cause I am what I am.
Plus, hey, it had Shelley Duvall, so yeah, there's that.
We may not be the best, but he's large.
I won't say I'm the biggest Popeye fan, but it does warm the cockles of my cold black heart when I see one of the cartoons, and of course, that movie. So I was kind of looking forward to seeing what some creative types might come up with once the character went into public domain, and they decided to make horror movies about it. So here are 3 films that took advantage of Popeye becoming public domain, made in the horror genre. You never know. One of them might be worth a gander. Shiver Me Timbers is new on demand from Gravitas Ventures. It's directed by Paul Stephen Mann and written by Paul Stephen Mann and E.C. Segar, who created Popeye. Olive Oil, played by Amy Mackey, her brother Castor, played by Brendan Nelson, and a group of friends go on a camping trip to see the passing of Halley's Comet. But the passing of the comet transforms a mild-mannered sailor into a moiterous Popeye, played by Tony Greer, and he's set his sights on Olive and her friends. Keeping up with the trend of taking public domain characters and simply making them into slashers, Shiver Me Timbers at least adds a little bit of Lovecraftian lore, a la The Color Out of Space, into the mix, with the passing of a comet causing horrible transformations. The gore flows aplenty in this one, with all kinds of splatter and fluids squirting in all directions. Popeye himself looks okay. At least it looks like Popeye, well enough, with puffy arms and a giant jaw, and unfortunately, that's about all I can say positively about this by-the-numbers slasher. At least the film doesn't take things too seriously, as it really seems to understand what kind of movie this is. There's stoner humor galore, hinting that the folks behind this one were most likely high on their own supply while making it, believing this shit is the funniest stuff ever. The over-the-top gory ending tries really hard to be epic in an Evil Dead 2 sort of way, but it also highlights the film's lack of budget, as Olive Oil's gigantic chainsaw looks like it was made out of tinfoil and cardboard. Sure, you can slather everything in blood, but that doesn't cover up how cheap it all looks. This is lowest common denominator filmmaking. It honestly doesn't feel like the filmmakers even tried to apply a bit of sense after the comet transforms an old sailor into Popeye the Killer. There's no real motivation for him to kill. No reason given why the comet made this transformation in the first place. Characters wander in and out of frame simply to be killed a few seconds later. The film is set in 1986 to coincide with the Halley's Comet passing, but nothing about this film feels like it was set in that era. It seems like the makers of Shiver Me Timbers rushed through the whole filmmaking process simply to be the first movie to be released since Popeye went into public domain. I guess they made it. Congrats, you have a shitty movie. I get it, these movies are riding the trend, but man, can someone just put some thought into it? It's not hard to come up with some horrifying take on Popeye or Mickey or whoever goes into the public domain. Why does it always fall into the slasher genre? Why not make it interesting, like a werewolf story, but instead of the moon causing the transformation, eating spinach does? I just sharted that one out in a few seconds. But no, let's just make him a slasher for no rhyme or reason. Next movie, please. Just skip Shiver Me Timbers. I wish I would have.
You owe me an apology.
Popeye's Revenge is streaming on Tubi from ITN Studios. It's directed by William Stead and written by Harry Boxley and E.C. Segar, who created Popeye. A boy named Popeye was born with deformed arms. Bullied by his classmates, Popeye fought back, accidentally killing one of the boys. Soon the townsfolk turned into an angry mob, the torch-bearing kind, who burned down Popeye's house, kill his parents, and chase him to a lake where he drowns. But ever since then, when the fog rolls in, Popeye rises from the lake to take revenge upon anyone near his old house. Years later, Tara, played by Emily Mullinger, and her friends plan to renovate Popeye's old house, cash in on the legend, and make it a haunt attraction. Of course, that clears the way for Popeye to sail in for some vengeance. Popeye's Revenge zags when you think it's going to zig by ignoring anything about the origins of Popeye and clumsily managing to smoosh the origins of Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger together to make the blandest slasher flick one can imagine. I know these are cheaply and quickly made as soon as some producer finds out the character has gone into public domain, but would it kill the writers to add some distinguishing characteristics from the Popeye cartoon in the script? Nothing about Popeye's Revenge, save for the fact that the killer looks like a live-action Popeye, has anything to do with the cartoon, which leads me to question why the hell this movie was made in the first place. I understand sometimes you can't have certain details due to copyright infringement, but still, you can't just go on the image of Popeye alone. I imagine the slasher script had been gathering dust for years, and Popeye was just injected into it at the last minute. As a slasher, Popeye's Revenge is mundane. Sure, there are a few brutal kills, and I actually thought the pencil drawings in the beginning were kind of fun, but none of the characters are worth giving a fig about. The entire cast has one characteristic to play with, and very little else. There's a cheating dude, his girlfriend, his lover, the pothead, the girl who is not interested in the pothead, and the righteous couple with good intentions. And that's about all the fleshing out this cast gets, though two of them hang around in bikinis, and you get to see one's tits. So that's cool. And of course, they all die in familiar and gruesome ways. As a positive, I guess, there's one scene where Popeye grabs a woman by her fake breast, and her breast implant pops, which is something I can honestly say I've never seen before in a horror movie. So there's that. Looky, we've got Harry Boxley as the writer for Popeye's Revenge. You might remember Boxley wrote not one, but two Steamboat Willie films, The Passable Mouseboat Massacre and The Wretched Mouse of Horrors, along with other fairy tale films like The OK, Mary Had a Little Lamb, a few films I haven't seen, like Fairest of Them All, Cinderella's Curse, and Hook, and one I'll be covering next time on Public Domain Horrors, Piglet. Boxley seems to be the guy to go to when you want to make a public domain or fairy tale horror movie that barely resembles the property and trying to quote-unquote pay homage to it. Popeye's Revenge is another flopper. Director William Stead is working on a new film already, I Know What You Did Last Christmas, and you know I'll be all over that one when it's released. Popeye's Revenge is made by the production team behind the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey series, but it's not part of that shared universe, which I guess is a good thing because this one's another dud as far as anything creatively accomplished with the public domain Popeye character.
You owe me an apology.
Finally, we have Popeye the Slayer Man, new on demand from Vantage Media. It's directed by Robert Michael Ryan and written by Jeff Miller, Robert Michael Ryan, John Doolan, and Cuyle Carvin. A group of college kids doing a paranormal investigation in a haunted spinach factory comes head-to-head with a local legend known as the Sailor Man, which has been rumored to haunt the factory for ages. Okay, this is far from a good movie, but compared to the other Popeye public domain horror flicks, this one's Citizen Kane. Popeye the Slayer Man has a coherent storyline, a few characters worth investing in, a bit of creativity, and a somewhat creative way of using the Popeye property. Everything I've criticized all of these public domain horror films about seems to be addressed in one way or another in Popeye the Slayer Man. The film utilizes bits and pieces of the Popeye property and at least tries to convert them through a horror lens. This is completely different than simply cut and pasting the lead character, Popeye, into the role of a slasher. The folks behind Popeye the Slayer Man at least knew who the character was, understood that character, and tried to mold a slasher movie around that, rather than simply smooshing the public domain character into the slasher template. Out of all three Popeye horrors I've checked out this week, Popeye the Slayer Man is the most well put together. It's not necessarily good, but it's the best of the bunch with some semblance of filmmaking prowess shown as well as attention to suspense, tension, and atmosphere. The story basically plops a bunch of kids in an abandoned factory with a killer Popeye wandering around and knocking them off one by one. It's a simple slasher format, but the kills are distinct, and some of them actually come off as quite clever, as one man causes his own death, only to set up the death of another who dies very similarly, but humorously. It's this type of thought behind the kills that most horror films, even those outside of the public domain horror genre, need to do more of. It actually feels as if writers Jeff Miller, Robert Michael Ryan, John Doolan, and Cuyle Carvin did a little research, giving Popeye some of his gruff character, remembering his catchphrases like "I am what I am," and even addressing his taste for spinach. All of this worked into the plot about the owners of a contaminated spinach factory trying to sell off the property for a cheap buck. It's not brain surgery. It simply seems as if someone actually watched a Popeye cartoon or two before writing the film. Imagine that. There's even a wimpy reference in this one, unlike all the other ones.
I would gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
He would gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
The kills are pretty brutal. The atmosphere is decent, with the dark factory serving as a good place to kill a bunch of 20-somethings. Popeye the Slayer Man is not charting new territory, but at least it's doing the slasher thing well. The way the Popeye looks is more cartoonish than the other two, with a very animated look to the mask. None of the films really know how to make Popeye look scary, really leaning into the uncanny valley effect of a cartoon character come to life. The mask of Popeye the Slayer Man at least articulates well, despite looking like Popeye with blood spattered all over him. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a huge recommendation, but if you're seeking out a Popeye public domain horror film this weekend, Popeye the Slayer Man is the one to go for. What about you guys? What do you feel about this public domain horror trend? How do you feel about Popeye? And what do you think of the original Robert Altman Popeye movie? I think it's kind of a cult classic, but maybe I'm alone on this. Let me know down in the comments.
I'm strong to the finish 'cause I eats me spinach. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man.
Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're